Okay, so it's a new day, and at the time of recording, May 2026, the Prime Minister of the UK, Sir Keir Starmer, continues to fight for his political survival. So he's now going to be potentially facing some challenges from his former health secretary, Wes Streeting, potentially Anne Rayner, who's thrown her hat into it, or potentially is going to throw her hat into a leadership contest, and also Andy Burnham, who's trying to find a way back into politics by contesting a by-election, I believe, in the north of the UK, as one of the MPs has stood down there. So it's a really precarious time for Sir Keir Starmer, who has basically just overseen one of the worst local election results in the UK, seeing historic losses, and the Reform Party in particular, which is a right-leaning party in the UK, seeing massive gains. And this is basically because Keir Starmer remains and is currently one of the most unpopular prime ministers we've ever had in the UK. He's not viewed, broadly speaking and anecdotally, as trustworthy. A lot of the pledges the Labour Party made when they came into power have not been met. And from my perspective, I believe the Labour Party has overseen, many regressive and oppressive legislative changes. So this is changes in terms of protesting and how that is being policed, and also an authoritarian regime regarding ID as well. So looking at digital IDs, some of the regulation they've introduced regarding companies as well. So this has introduced controls around, persons of significant control, and also the Online Safety Act as well, which is another good example of where there tends to be this movement towards, in my view, over policing on the basis that, this is all intended to keep us safer. It's also a party as well that's overseen, one of the most regressive changes to the immigration system, and the path to established settlement in the UK. So they've doubled the amount of time it needs before you can become, legally settled in the UK and have security over your, residency and contribute to society. So I think in the backdrop of all of this and his unpopularity, and the fact that, certainly reform appeared to be something of an answer to many people, as well as also the Greens and anybody else that isn't Labour, those that are now looking to compete for that position as Prime Minister, in my view, will probably have to try and offer something different, essentially. And this is also taking some attention away from the fact that not too long ago, we were talking about Keir Starmer's relationship with Lord Mandelson and that connection to Jeffrey Epstein as well. So this is really a troubling time for Keir Starmer, where his professional judgment has been brought into question based on the lack of a vetting process with respect to Lord Mandelson and his links there, and whether or not he actually knew and was never going to rely on that clearance procedure, as well as basically seeing massive historic losses where basically Wales, Labour has lost governing power in Wales for the first time ever to Plaid Cymru, and also made massive losses in Scotland as well, which often was seen as a reliable place for Labour, but that's now a place where the Scottish National Party has consolidated its power. So, as I say, in the context of all of this happening, one would hope that the, contenders for his position will be offering something different to show that they are not part of this new Labour regime that Keir Starmer is overseeing. One of the, potential challengers is Wes Streeting, who resigned as the health secretary. And one of the things he mentioned was a wealth tax. This is something I've been asking the Labour Party to really talk about, actually, because as I've said in a previous video when I've talked about, the Labour Party in general, if they're positioning themselves as a centre-left party, a socialist adjacent party, and its roots are within unions and worker rights, hence the name Labour, then you would think this would be a party that would have a very serious conversation around the tax regime, how to make it more equitable, and to either, you know, explicitly state they're behind a wealth tax in some form, or explicitly explain why a wealth tax is bad for the ordinary worker. And up until now, they've largely remained silent on this. Now, Rachel Reeves has talked about a wealth tax of sorts with respect to the new tax that she introduced on mansions, essentially. So these were homes, I believe, that are around £2 million in valuation, where there was an additional, council tax to be paid on top of the normal council tax that would be applied. And in my view, that's a badly implemented wealth tax because it's treating your main residence as part of your wealth. And as I say, from my perspective, you need somewhere to live. You can't choose to sell your home, realize a capital gain on that, and then be left with nowhere to live, right? So for me, that's a bad example of a wealth tax, but it is legitimately a wealth tax. Now, as I say, Wes Streeting has also now talked about a wealth tax quite explicitly. But I think my concern and my frustration with this, as well as the badly implemented mansion tax, as we call it, is that there seems to be this deliberate confusion and conflation around what Labour actually believes a wealth tax to be. And I think it's a symptom of the Labour Party in general, where they continue to try and position themselves as a sensible, pragmatic, balanced, middle of the road party. And I think when it comes to something like wealth taxes, when it comes to things like, immigration, when it comes to things like borders, and other very sensitive topics where, economic decisions are difficult and people are sensitive to them, this middle of the road approach can be quite problematic and it can actually be quite frustrating for many voters. So what Wes Streeting is actually outlining here is that he wants to basically increase the taxes you pay on capital gains. So what this would mean, for example, is that if you have any assets, so these will be things like gold, it might be a second home you have, it might be shares typically that are not protected in an ISA, then basically the taxes you pay will be the same as the tax bandings for your normal salary, right? So basically capital gains tax when you sell an asset will just be higher, right? And I think for me, this is very, very frustrating. And I think for me, it really shows the problem Labour has, because a wealth tax is a tax on wealth, not income and not capital gains, right? So capital gains is a type of, ad hoc income as and when you sell an asset, right? But you have to sell the asset to realize that gain to then be taxed. And this tax has always existed, right? So by introducing a more aggressive capital gains tax, what has fundamentally changed, other than basically ordinary people will continue to pay more and more tax, whether it be through their salaries or whether it be through selling assets they may own, right? Whilst those that do not sell their assets because they don't have to, they simply continue to buy assets and hoard them. So they continue to buy all the houses, they continue to buy all the shares, they continue to buy all the commodities, all the land, but they're not selling them, they're just sitting on them, they're just holding them. Their tax bill will not increase based on this new proposal by Wes Streeting. So for me, it's a bit ridiculous that you have a Labour Party where initially Rachel Reeves in her economic announcements was talking about the fact that they've, started making the tax system fairer by introducing a wealth tax on people's homes. And then you have a health secretary who's sort of positioning himself as the next leader of a central left party, talking about a wealth tax that more aggressively taxes ordinary people that are looking to sell assets. And whilst all the while, those that would be in line, in my view, in the crosshairs for an actual wealth tax on assets, and this will be a tax on assets they're not selling, they're hoarding, they're completely unaffected by this wealth tax Wes Streeting is talking about. So I think for me, this sums up the Labour Party in many ways, and I think this is why they continue to remain unpopular. I think this is why they continue not to speak to their normal political base, and I think this is why people continue to look for alternatives, where if they are now left-leaning, they're looking at parties like the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party, But if they're more right-leaning and have more conservative or traditional values, as they say, they're looking at conservatives and looking at reform. So, you know, Labour have really, in my mind, lost themselves. You know, they're in a real pickle about what their political identity is. And I think this proposal by Wes Streeting around a wealth tax completely sums up, you know, in a nutshell, this identity problem and this, you know, this sort of an inability to read the room and understand the needs and the requirements of their political base. So yeah, I mean, let me know your thoughts about all of this. I'll be interested to hear, you know, what you guys think. But until next time, take care. Peace.